This story is also about a doctor. We've covered many tales involving medical professionals, and now another one joins the list. Just as unsettling and peculiar as the rest. Deborah Rago, born in 1957, grew up in a financially struggling family in Williamsville, New York. In 1978, while working as a pharmacy technician, Debbie met Lehigh University student Anthony Pignataro. He was tall, handsome, and clean-cut, carrying himself with a kind of serious, steady confidence that made him instantly memorable. Anthony was the son of Ralph Pignataro, a well-respected surgeon in Buffalo, New York. He had always wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and join the medical profession. But the mainland U.S. medical schools he applied to rejected him, forcing him to take a different route. Anthony ultimately enrolled at the San Juan Bautista School of Medicine in Puerto Rico. After graduating from school, Anthony and Deborah got married. About a year into the marriage, he cheated on her. Deborah was devastated, but she chose to forgive him, convinced at the time that it was just a single lapse in judgment, something they could move past together. At the clinic where Anthony began practicing after medical school, people started to whisper about him. Colleagues, and even some patients, noticed something off in the way he worked. He often seemed inexperienced, as if he lacked the polish expected of a trained surgeon. There were murmurs that he didn't always finish procedures properly or that he overlooked important steps. These early warning signs didn't draw much attention at the time, but they were already shaping a troubling reputation around him. Pignataro eventually opened his own plastic surgery practice in the Buffalo suburb of West Seneca, New York. It was a move that positioned him as an ambitious, up-and-coming surgeon, at least on the surface. Over time, Anthony Pignataro began appearing regularly on television. People came to know him not only as a plastic surgeon, but as a man who styled himself an inventor. His claim to fame was bizarre and unsettling. The snap-on toupee, a hairpiece that attached to the head using metal bolts surgically implanted into the skull. The concept was as simple as it was disturbing. A surgeon would anchor hardware into a man's scalp, and the toupee would literally snap into place. Pignataro had started losing his own hair at the age of 23 and proudly became his own first customer, showing off the results as a walking advertisement for his creation. He made a small fortune performing breast augmentations and other cosmetic procedures. Money was pouring in, and he quickly became known as something of a local moneybags. But the richer Anthony became, the more he pushed to widen his profit margin. To cut overhead costs, Pignataro slashed corners wherever he could. Instead of hiring a registered nurse, he brought on a licensed practical nurse and even a high school student to assist him during surgical procedures. Even his wife worked as his assistant, sometimes helping him directly during surgical procedures. Tasks that should have been handled by trained medical professionals had, in Pignataro's practice, become a family operation, one where safety and standards were sacrificed for convenience and profit. By this time, the Pignataros had 2 children, a son and a daughter, and were living in a large house in West Seneca. Anthony, along with his now famous snap-on toupee, liked to make an impression. He often cruised around town in a bright red Lamborghini, a flashy symbol of the image he worked so hard to project. Meanwhile, Pignataro was making serious surgical mistakes. After performing an abdominoplasty on a patient named Terry Lamarty, he allegedly left her with open bleeding wounds. When Terry complained about the pain and the condition of her incisions, Pignataro didn't sympathize. He reportedly yelled at her, accusing her of overreacting. In 1996, a 26-year-old mother of two from Deepview, New York, stopped breathing during a breast augmentation procedure. Pignataro's facility didn't even have a ventilator, and Sarah Smith died on the operating table. The investigation that followed exposed Anthony Pignataro's incompetence for everyone to see. It was revealed that he wasn't a board-certified plastic surgeon. In fact, he wasn't even properly qualified to practice plastic surgery at all. He had also failed to administer Sarah Smith's anesthesia correctly, a critical error that contributed to her death. The New York State Board of Health ultimately charged him with 30 counts of professional misconduct, a list of violations so severe that it left no room for excuses. Anthony pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide and was sentenced to 6 months in jail, a $5,000 fine, and community service. His medical license was revoked. Judge Ronald H. Tills made it clear that Pignataro would never practice medicine again, anywhere in the world. After his release, Anthony struggled to find any kind of employment. His name was tainted and door after door slammed shut in his face, but Debbie stood by him. She continued to support him through everything. His well-to-do mother, Lena Pignataro, also stepped in, helping the family financially. In 1999, Debbie began to fall ill. She suffered bouts of nausea, numbness in her limbs, and severe pain throughout her body. The symptoms would come and go, but when they struck, she was bedridden. Over time, things grew worse. Debbie started experiencing memory loss, and on some days, she needed a wheelchair just to get around. Anthony told her the solution was simple. She should have her gallbladder removed. But her doctors refused. They warned that surgery would kill her in her weakened state. Finally, one of her physicians ordered a hair test. The results were staggering. Debbie had consumed 29,580 milligrams of arsenic. No one could mistake that for an accident. Anthony tried to explain it away. He claimed that the family of Sarah Smith, the patient who had died under his care, was poisoning Debbie to punish him. It soon became clear that the husband of the late Sarah Smith had moved with his children to another city long ago. He had no opportunity and no physical access to Debbie. The idea that he could have poisoned her was impossible, a story that fell apart the moment anyone looked at the facts. Around that time, another detail surfaced. Anthony claimed that their daughter had also felt sick that day, but the difference was unmistakable. The girl merely felt unwell, thankfully nothing serious. Debbie, on the other hand, was dying. When doctors questioned her about what she had eaten, Debbie remembered she'd had soup. She hadn't finished it, but she had eaten more than half the bowl. Later, their daughter said she had found the rest of that soup in the kitchen and finished it herself. Once investigators pieced the events together, the truth became undeniable. It was Anthony. He had poisoned the soup, and he had fully intended to get rid of his wife. The only reason Debbie survived was horrifying in itself. She didn't die from that massive dose of arsenic because her body had already become partially accustomed to the poison. Anthony had been feeding her small amounts of arsenic over time. So when he finally gave her a large, lethal dose, Debbie's body had developed a degree of tolerance. Judge Mario J. Rossetti described the former surgeon's life as a charade of misrepresentation, calling him self-centered and manipulative, a man who showed disrespect for the value of human life. Rossetti sentenced him to 15 years in prison. Not long after his release in 2013, he returned to the Buffalo area, changed his name to Tony Hote, and opened a business called Tony Hote Cosmetique LLC. The company sold a line of skincare creams formulated from one's own DNA-derived plasma. His website referred to him as a doctor. The Erie County District Attorney later launched a criminal investigation into Pignataro's new cosmetic venture. Pignataro responded to the report by saying he had changed his name in an effort to make a fresh start. He apologized to his ex-wife and to the Smith family, though he offered no specific admissions of guilt. He also claimed that he now worked as a delivery driver. Under his new name, he showed up on a freelance website offering services as a caregiver for elderly clients. It was almost surreal. A man with his history presenting himself as a gentle caretaker for people who couldn't defend themselves. Interestingly, history has seen something similar. Long ago, some kings and noblemen intentionally consumed tiny amounts of poison to build up a tolerance. They did it out of fear that their enemies might someday attempt to poison them. And when that moment came, when someone slipped poison into their food or wine, they survived, simply because their bodies had already adapted to it. A strategy befitting ancient courts and political intrigue, and a disturbing parallel to Debbie's case, though hers was not a choice, but a crime inflicted upon her